I would like to welcome you all as SHURA Energy Transformation Center. We are delighted to welcome you at this important launch event. Today, we are here to share our latest research on the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will be fully implemented as of 2026. This mechanism, which is currently only implemented by the EU, affects all major trading partners, and it may be possible for other countries outside the EU to implement similar mechanisms in the future. So, as Turkey, how can we adapt to this transformation? How can we stay competitive? Today, we will seek answers to these questions together. As you all know, the carbon border adjustment mechanism implemented by the EU aims to apply carbon pricing to the import of emission-intensive products and to subject both domestic and imported products to the same taxation. In this way, it is aimed to prevent carbon-intensive products from being produced abroad and evading taxes, that is, carbon leakage. At the same time, this policy equalizes carbon taxes, protecting the competitiveness of products within the EU against imported products. CBAM is of great importance for all countries exporting to the European Union. And when we look at it from Turkey's point of view, the fact that EU is Turkey's largest trading partner and that more than 40% of Turkey's exports are made to the EU shows that this mechanism is of critical importance for Turkey. After the election, the US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and the cessation of support programs, Trump's re-election, may slow down the global green transformation in the short term, and we have some question marks in this respect. These are being discussed. However, when we look at the UN, both the net zero carbon target and the protection of competitiveness remain important on the agenda in the EU. Decarbonization, trade policies, maintaining competitiveness and industrial transformation are among the most discussed issues, both in the world and in Turkey. So as SHURA, we have many Turkey's industrial transformation. While these studies aim at Turkey's economic development and decarbonization, they emphasize increasing the competitiveness of the industry and following a roadmap compatible with the green transformation. In this process, of course, it becomes clear that it is essential to go beyond the perspective of green and digital transformation and to transition to a high-tech and high value added production composition in key sectors in line with Turkey's development goals. Because such a transformation would not only increase our competitiveness, but also significantly reduce the energy and carbon intensity of our industry. So at this point, the fact that Turkey's need for structural transformation in the industry coincides with the green transformation that creates a great opportunity for Turkey. In order to achieve energy transition and economic development together, it is very important to develop holistic industrial, transportational, financial, and trade policies integrated into international value chains. Managing this process with the right policies and strategies will provide environmental and economic gain. The report we present today provides a more detailed look at the need for structural transformation in industrial sectors, especially within the framework of CBAM, and aims to analyze the impacts of CBAM on industry and trade quantitatively and qualitatively. One of the most important findings from the report is that in strategic production areas such as iron, steel, cement, aluminum, and fertilizers, the total cost of exports exceeds its benefit without even applying the carbon price. This situation reveals the necessity of restructuring the energy transition and industrial and trade policy. Of course, industrial transformation is too comprehensive a process to be managed by policies such as carbon pricing alone. investing in green technologies, improving energy efficiency, making supply chains carbon neutral, and evaluating international financing opportunities are key elements of this transformation. When we look at the results of the report, we see that the industrial transformation is carried out, the total costs in the CBAM sectors will decrease, and Turkey will be able to maintain its competitive advantage in international markets. In our report, we also presented a series of policy recommendations to minimize the impacts of CBAM and support transformation. And Yael will be giving you some information on that shortly. In addition to the transition to carbon pricing and ETS practices, it is, of course, of great importance to use carbon tax revenues in transformation. We're not only discussing the sectoral impacts of CBAM, we also discuss how Turkey can prepare for a sustainable and competitive industrial transformation. And in this process, it is of great importance in that public, private sectors, academia, and NGOs act together. We will have a brief presentation in a moment summarizing the main findings of our report. After the presentation, we will have the opportunity to discuss the issue from different perspectives with the contributions of our 5 valuable panelists. Our panel includes important representatives from Turkey's public and private sectors and economists, as well as international participants from think tanks operating in the field of energy transition in Germany and Brazil. In particular, sharing international experiences will contribute to our understanding of different aspects of the process, considering that CBAMs affect not only Turkey, but also many countries on a global scale. We think that mutual experience sharing is of great importance. I would like to thank in advance to all the participants, as well as primarily senior economist Gülay Dinçel, who served as our advisor on this report. I hope that the report will provide important insights in terms of Turkey's industrial transformation and energy policies. Now, with your permission, I will turn the floor to Yael Taranto, Senior Analyst at SHURA Center for Energy Transition, to present her report. Thank you very much for this comprehensive start. I also would like to say welcome to all the panelists, all the participants, and I hope that we are going to have a great, fruitful discussion together with you. I'm going to share my screen now to present my report. I think you are able to see. Thank you very much. So, CBAM and Türkiye, interactions between the sectors, benefits and costs. So what is our purpose and scope in this report? So within the scope of CBAM, there are strategic products that are carbon intensive, difficult to decarbonize, and have no substitutes and provide inputs to critical sectors. Therefore, in these products, it is critical to design product composition, domestic production, import-export balance, and integration into international value chains. And in this report, we aim to open up the discussion by revealing the costs and benefits that are mostly not felt on the basis of companies, are not directly priced, but have economic consequences. And in this context, the costs within the scope of CBAM implementation were evaluated in a holistic framework, taking into account all the benefits and costs in the related sectors, and it was aimed to provide input to industrial and trade policies. As Alkım Hanım mentioned earlier, we also took foundations from related works of SHURA. We worked on net zero in February 2023, roadmap for Turkey's electricity sector. And we also made our projections and assumptions based on this study. We also have another study, industrial policy alternatives for Turkey within the scope of just transition. And in these just transition and regional employment policy options for Turkey, these two works were the studies that we benefited from, and Net Zero 2053, socioeconomic impacts of the transition to carbon-free energy in Turkey, and CBAM and Türkiye were the related works of SHURA. So what is CBAM? What is the scope of CBAM? So this actually is aiming to apply the same carbon costs. And there are, the first application is for aluminum, cement, iron and steel, fertilizers, electricity and hydrogen. So in the graphic, you see in the middle, there are emissions directly related to the production by plant. This is the scope 1. And the scope 2 is the electricity that is used in the production of CBAM. And in the third one, the inputs and intermediate products covered by CBAM, especially related to iron and steel. For instance, raw steel is in the scope here, and there are some products that are produced using the raw steel, but also the transportation, distribution, they are not within the scope. In the scope 3, these are the outputs in the consumption, transportation, distribution, and end-of-life disposal of products. They are also not within the scope. What did we do here? If you ask us, within the scope of CBAM, we do not work on electricity and hydrogen, but we are working or making assumptions related to secondary and tertiary raw materials, especially related to the transportation of raw materials and distribution and waste from past phases. These are the ones that we took into account. So what kind of an application CBAM is going to follow? In these 6 sectors, in October 2023, it is the transitional period. And in 2026 January, the beginning of payment period will start. And until 2030, the expansion of scope is targeted. And the EU plans to expand the scope to include all ETS sectors. And in 2034, full implementation is going to start. The first phase of CBAM will reach full implementation in 2034. We aim to have the taxation in the full scope. So this is an economic study, and therefore we would like to explain you some basic concepts in order to speak the same language. So when we talk about production and export value, it is the material value of the quantity actually produced by the units based on sales, including stock changes and resale of goods and services. On the other hand, value added, this is very important and we are really interested in it. So gross income from business activities after adjustments to business subsidies and indirect taxes. It is calculated by deducting operating expenses such as raw materials, energy, maintenance, and repair from the production and export value, and the wages and salaries of the employees in production are included in the added value. So this is how this is calculated. So when we talk about the value added rate, it is the rate of the value added created from production to the value of the production. Sometimes this can get confused. We also talk about forward and backward linkage sectors. What we mean here is this. Forward linkage sectors are defined as sectors that use the production of the sector under study as inputs, and backward linked sectors are defined as sectors that provide inputs to production in the examined sector. For instance, in steel and iron, the backward linkage is mining, and forward is the machinery or building or cement. Mining is the backward linkage, whereas construction is forward linkage. So in this work, when we make comparison to other studies, this actually has a unique perspective. That's why I would like to tell you about it. So our basic method is this. We have a 3-step quantitative cost-benefit calculation. We make quantitative comparisons and qualitative determinations. So these 3 steps, what are these 3 steps? In the first step, we take into consideration the direct impacts, the carbon emission related to the export, the foreign trade deficit, price increases, and energy demand increase as costs. And as benefits, we take into account the export value added, if there are any foreign trade surplus, again, price decreases, if those can be also benefits, and if energy demands decline. In the second step, we take into consideration the indirect impacts. These are related to the forward and backward linkage sectors. In terms of costs, forward-linked sectors value added decline, or backward-linked sectors value added decline in terms of costs and benefits. And in the third step, indirect impacts, carryover impacts, carbon emissions from transportations, or fuel used in transportations. These are the things that we take into account. Now, I would like to tell you about the scenarios and assumptions that we used in this work. We have 2 different parts in this one. This is the first one is business as usual, BAU, the shortened version of it, for the 24-50 period. It is assumed that export growth will develop in line with past realizations, and the composition of product groups in export will be similar to that of the past. So when we talk about the industrial transformation for the same period, 2024-2050 period, an industrial transformation is envisaged, and the main axis of which is the production composition that will facilitate the green transformation and increase the unit added value. Increase in the weight of relatively high value added products in production capacity in CBAM sectors, and decrease in high exports, low value added products, and domestic production, high value added products subject to import, development of sustainable products, and increase in the weight of high value added machinery equipment, electrical equipment, automotive, energy equipment, construction, infrastructure sectors that use CBAM products as basic inputs in production. So we did not include the costs and benefits related to the energy transition.
We have had basic assumptions here demographically and in terms of GDP. And here you can see our basic assumptions. I would like to underline here is that this is not a scenario where growth is stopped or hindered. It's not a degrowth scenario. Turkey will continue to grow, but with a different product composition. Again, some basic properties of the transformation scenario is as follows. Here we follow low-tech sectors and medium low-tech sectors increasing. Actually, our CBAM products are in this category. Iron and steel is here. Non-metallic minerals are here. Cement is also here in this category. And of course, fertilizer is in the chemical sector, but it can be included in this category as well. And aluminum is also in this sector as a main metal product. On the other side, medium, high, and high technology industries are expected to grow in this scenario. And in each sector also, due to transition towards more value-added products, this is a scenario where the average value added will increase. And when we look at the periods, in that sense, from 2021 to 2040, we see in this scenario that the value-added ratio of the manufacturing industry will increase to 31%, whereas value-added per employee will increase by 78%. Let's take a look at the basic assumptions about that we have taken into effect for this report. Of course, in the study, we have made some alternative carbon border price assumptions as 70 euro, 100 euro, and 120 euro per ton. And also taking into account the length of the projection period and general trends, our main assumption has been taken as 100 euro per ton. Of course, this is all debatable. We can go back and adjust these assumptions as well. But as you can see that the results and outcomes do not change that much, as you will shortly see. Emission factors were taken as the same in both scenarios for the same products, and we have not assumed any decarbonization on a product-by-product basis as well. And the results were evaluated under the same assumptions for Turkey's CBAM products for the world, including the EU, and EU exports only were two different categories of comparisons to where we got separate outcomes and results. Our main assumptions we used, you can see in these tables, and also in the BAU and transformation scenarios are treated differently. We see decreases in the transformation scenario, whereas there is no change in the BAU scenarios for main assumptions. I would like to explain at this point that we have taken 2 or 3 basic scenarios. We can also think of in-between scenarios, but since this is a basic comparison study, we wanted to see the impact of these different basic scenarios so we can differentiate between the impact and the inputs here as well. And we see that in a scenario where the product composition in the industry is changing and where the transformation of the industry infrastructure is changing, is taken as a basic scenario for these comparisons. And we have also looked at the impact of export and Also, we looked into the impact of forward and backward linkage sectors, and also the transportation costs were also designed in connection with the global issues. So what were our findings, if you would ask us? When you look at this table, we see that in general, our main conclusion is that the transformation scenario can greatly mitigate the negative impact arising from emission costs under CBAM. When we look at the BAU scenario, the business as usual scenario, the first column from the left shows us that even with a carbon price of 0, we see that when we get the negative figures for our cost to benefit ratio in a very general overall perspective. This is the case for 0 pricing. Of course, we see that as the carbon prices increase, the costs will also increase, is the logical assumption. And we see that for 70 euro per ton, we still have impact will be, as you can see here, will also bring the costs higher than the benefits. When we look at the transformation scenarios, on the other hand, we see that in 420 euro per ton, we see that there is a net benefit from all of these scenarios, especially taking into effect the positive impact in the forward linkage sectors. What is the breaking point? 124 euros per ton for worldwide export, but for export to EU, this changes to 224 euros per ton if we are able to adjust the product composition and our transformation. This is the point of resilience for our industry. Of course, there are limits to decarbonization or carbon-free applications. When we look at the results here, we see here is the impact or where we have different, as you can see, impacts here for the world on the left-hand side, EU on the right-hand side. The dark blue is the export added value, whereas orange is the foreign trade equivalents, and you can see yellow is the direct carbon cost, and the purple is the transport costs in that sense. And you can see here, assuming the carbon price, as you can see here, is given. As you can see here in the business as usual scenario, the direct cost of carbon in export to the world exceeds the export value added, where transport costs and foreign trade deficit are added. The total costs are 2.8 times the total benefits. The value added in exports to the EU exceeds the carbon cost, but the total costs exceed the total benefit due to the impact of transport costs in that sense. In the transformation scenario, despite the decrease in export value added compared to the original scenario, we see the worst in the world, and the EU net benefits can be obtained thanks to the increase in the value added in forward linkage sectors especially, and the reduced carbon and transportation costs. As you can see here, especially the increase of value added in the forward linkage sectors enables us to have net benefits in that sense, the increase. When we look at it on a sector base, we see that in the transformation scenario, we have positive contributions to the net benefit in exports to the world, and coming from the iron and steel and aluminum sectors. But in the fertilizer sector, we have reduction of total net benefit with a negative contribution. In the EU, in the transformation scenario, we have positive impact for all industries in that sense. And of course, where we say a net benefit, when we look at benefit minus cost, we have a comparison with GDP, and we will see here is that in the BAU scenario, there is a significant negative impact, as a negative ratio, so to say. And in the export EU, we have a very small deviation from neutral when compared to current GDP, especially in terms of export to EU. There is no significant impact and compared to our GDP. But when we compare it, on the other hand, with sectoral net, the benefit, sectoral value added, we see that there is a quite significant negative impact in the BAU scenario, whereas in the transformation scenario, except for fertilizer, we see positive impact. Now, looking at qualitative results, because what this brings us in the more comprehensive perspective, and in comparison to the GDP, employment, and interregional cooperation and collaboration, what could be the impact for these policies? We see that in the transformation scenario, the weight of higher technology and more value-added sectors, as well as more labor-intensive sectors, can make an additional contribution to both GDP and employment. And other studies that we've carried out give us a similar conclusions. And again, in the transformation scenario, while the export products with excess capacity, or which are dependent on imported products, are decreased, and the domestic production of imported value-added products may positively be impacted. In that sense, we could actually measure this up to a point, not completely, maybe. And so we can also see in the transformation scenario that access to better jobs can be a positive contribution, possibly, especially in terms of a reduction of regional inequalities, and diversifying employment opportunities could be possible with the increase of the weight on of production, manufacturing, other sectors. We believe that this could be similar social contributions. So rather than production, especially rather than a decrease in production, also increase in production, this could also especially be impacted by this decrease on dependency on imported products. When we look at various industries, especially in iron and steel, we see that there is an actually overcapacity in low value added imported scrap dependent long steel products. This is actually compensated by export. On the other hand, we have insufficient capacity in high value added flat steel, and we have import product dependency there. What we do in the transformation scenario is that we foresee that the share of flat steel will reach 50% in the long term. And we foresee that the share of exports is not exceed 15% in both flat and long products. And in that sense, we see benefits in forward linkage sectors, especially in machinery, automotive, and electrical equipment. You can see this in the previous tables as well. In the BAU scenario, in comparison to export cost, we see that emissions, foreign trade deficit, and transport-related costs, which are high in the BAU scenario, significantly reduce in the transformation scenario. And in this way, the net value can turn from negative to positive. When we look at the aluminum sector, we see that I would like to point out here the aluminum industry is very significant in this regard, especially for areas of energy transition. Aluminum is a rising product in terms of input. And when we look at the production in Turkey, we see that we have secondary aluminum produced from scrap and intermediate products, and the import concentrate. We see that there is an external surplus in terms of Turkey aluminum trade with the EU, but there is also an external deficit in trade with the world overall. So although there seems to be a positive impact from trade with you, we say that this is actually a tip-off because we do a lot of imports to be able to realize this export to EU. So we import not from EU, but from other regional, global regions in that sense. So in the BAU scenario, we see that added value of export, which consists of relatively low value added product, is at par with the direct cost of emission. So cost of emission is actually on par with the value added of export. In the transformation scenario, on the other hand, the benefits stand out, especially in forward linkage sectors, especially in fabricated metal products, machinery, electrical equipment, and automotive industry. So this is a similar scenario to the iron and steel industry. When we look at the cement industry, we see that there's a different structure here. In cement, we don't have any other issue like a foreign trade deficit like in the other industries. And apart from the energy inputs, which mainly consist of fossil fuels. And we see that apart from that, there is a foreign trade surplus as well, and there is a higher value added. But when we come to the export, we see that in spite of high transport costs, there is also high export in this industry. When we look at the table on the previous graph, we see that there is very high emission and transport costs as well, especially in terms of export to the world, are present. And if we don't have a transformation scenario in place, this will in time take us to negative figures. And the transformation scenario significantly reduces these, and especially in related industries, there is a significant benefit as well, and especially for construction and infrastructure industries. And we see the benefits here to these industries. And lastly, I would like to also look into the fertilizer industry. Approximately 60% of Turkey's total fertilizer consumption and about 85% of chemical fertilizer consumption are met by imports. And we see also that 90% of the chemical fertilizer raw materials produced domestically are actually imported. So, so we can do very little export, and this is a very highly priced, high cost export in that sense. So we believe that therefore it is necessary to look into transformation scenarios here. If we can look into the transformation strategies, we see that by increasing the share of high value added products, especially in iron and steel and aluminum sectors, and by supporting the forward linkage sectors in domestic market and reducing the foreign trade deficit are significant strategies. We can reduce both the foreign trade deficit and transportation and emission costs by reducing these as well. And we can increase amount of net benefit in that sense. And it's not possible for us to diversify the exports in that sense, but in that sense, there are certain strategies to be able to reduce the maintenance and transport costs as well. For example, in iron and steel, how do we move on to added value products in that sense is another issue. Especially in terms of carbon intensive industries such as flat steel, we can also increase capacities of certain categories. You can use hydrogen DRI technology to push decarbonization is also another significant potential in terms of strategy. And as for fertilizers on the medium term, the use and production of green hydrogen, ammonium is an important potential for decarbonization, as we can see here. And my final conclusions I can say is that while designing policies for CBAM sectors, it's important that the strategic dimension of these sectors and their contributions to the country's economy not be ignored. In that sense, as we said in the beginning, these are actually industries that provide contributions to many other linkage-related sectors as well, and policies should be developed against the negative impact of structural transformation as well, also in various industries and various transformational strategies in that sense. And actions and investments within the framework of Turkey's current sectoral decarbonization roadmaps should be evaluated by taking into effect both the resource constraints and the total benefits. So it should be a holistic and in sectors where it's difficult to decarbonize, such as CBAM sectors, prioritizing value-added products that reduce carbon intensity rather than maintaining current growth trends and product composition. In that sense, this can be very positive impacts and potentials as well. So when we look at what we can do here, and the first point that you can see here was already stressed by myself, underlined by myself, even without carbon pricing, the total cost of exports in CBAM sectors already exceeds the total benefits. And also, we need to have green transformation and energy transition always in the perspective when designing the structural transformation policies. The decarbonization roadmap should be developed with multiple alternative scenarios. And also the timing of this transformation is crucial. The focus should be on 2035 to 2040 period, definitely, because given the conditions of international competition, we see that similar policies are being developed in the EU and other regions as well through the EU CBAM. And there are some comeback from certain policies in the EU as well, and some new implementations are in the pipeline. But continuing a CBAM and maybe enlarging CBAM is, as far as we can see in the pipeline. Also, in a national carbon pricing and ETS implementation can also strengthen Turkey's position in the EU market. Because we haven't underlined this before, but we have to stress it here. So the carbon pricing, national carbon pricing and carbon taxation is actually deducted from the carbon border tax that the EU implements. So if we already have a taxation for these products, the resource can remain in the country as a domestic resource, and the remaining part can be paid to the EU. And last but not least, international cooperation and financing opportunities should be evaluated also to support industrial transformation. And also I have to say that climate diplomacy and cooperation and collaboration with other exporting countries impacted by the CBAM will be critical for just sharing of the costs. I would like to thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation here. And we have a panel now, which we believe will be interesting for everyone. And I should have actually pointed out before, you can also start writing your questions from the Q&A section. And questions both pertaining to this presentation and other things that come to mind during the panel, we will be able to share with you afterwards. And I would now like to move on to the panel, the title of which is been determined as Competitiveness in CBAM and the Industry. And the panel will be as follows. We will continue from our present topic, and we will first listen to our panelists from Turkey, and then we will expand our perspective to look into EU, and last but not least, move towards the rest of the world with Brazil. I would now like to first ask a question to Gülay Dinçel. She has been actually active in sustainable development as a very experienced economist. And she has been stressing the need for a holistic industrial strategy encompassing both sustainable development as well as competitiveness in the industry. Based on this emphasis, what are the choices we are facing? How will CBAM and the Green Deal affect our priorities? Please, ma'am, the floor is yours. Hello. First of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation and greetings to all the attendees. I would like to say at this point that for a long time, we are familiar with various studies carried out by the SHURA Energy Transition Center, as well as, you know, cooperating in the latest study. So I would like to maybe expand on the question from this perspective. But first, I think we need to answer the question that Turkey, or does Turkey currently have an industrial strategy at the moment? So very shortly, you can say that there is, we can unfortunately not talk about the existence of a solid, comprehensive industrial strategy in that sense. Maybe in terms of history, a few comments first. I can say that definitely with international developments, with the current international model, has been influential in developing our countries' national strategies in the 60s from industrial strategy was the case. In line with the current conditions of the global structure at that time and the structure of our country as Turkey at that time. Of course, there were some industries which were starting from scratch and some were partially developed only. So the strategy was formulated and continued until the 80s in that regard. When we look at the 80s, we see that, of course, industry transformation strategy based on exports were also developed to increase the competitiveness of Turkey in international markets, and moving towards higher employment, as was the focus at the time. This is just, you know, very rough description of the historical highlights in terms of industrial strategies in our country. And these are the highlights in the history of our country. And we can, at this point, I think we also need to look into the international developments. Relatively in the late 90s, we see the emergence of a not holistic at the time, but a more comprehensive industrial strategy worldwide as a framework based on international agreements of the time. But when we move to the more recent past, especially as of the 2010s, early 2010s, we see that there is a slippage in that sense in terms of the development of strategies. Of course, following 2010, there were some in-between policies enacted with certain goals and activities with development plans, and which also pour into some strategy documents where some developments in the industrial manufacturing was experienced, especially following 2013, where we see the burden of the Turkish economy being undertaken mostly by industrial manufacturing sectors. But this scenario that I can see that I've defined to you as a lack of strategy. The main problem is that there is no prioritization, no sectoral hierarchies, and we just have the continuation of past strategies. So this is the policy that is continuation of past policies that should have been revised and changed in time. And this is the condition that especially manufacturing industries are in, where there's no prioritization for these industries. It's more of a horizontal continuation and horizontal hierarchy of all industries, I can say very briefly. And at this point, when we are considering the Turkish economy, we see there is a lot of structural issues that we have to take into effect in that sense, including a series of issues brought forth by the current economic factors overall on a national scale. And of course, we need to determine certain reasons for these issues. When we're talking about industry here, compared to other peer countries, we see that there is a developed infrastructure in Türkiye, and in spite of all of the issues, in spite of all of the transformation needs, we see that there is a significant infrastructure in terms of production capacity, also in terms of employment, and also in terms of competencies, labor competencies as well. And again, compared to peer countries, we see that Turkey also has a higher potential in that sense. Well, of course, we talk about certain advantages, including geographical and demographical advantages, and also in general talk about some raw material restrictions or overall, like resource restrictions as well, in terms of pros and cons. Of course, one of the major factors that provide us with an advantage, and we look at the Turkish history, and in comparison to peer countries, we see that the basic industries or the heavy industry sectors have been established quite early in the Republic through the early investments of the Republic. And this is a major advantage that we have as a country. And we are aware of some of these advantages and not so much aware of certain other advantages. And in that sense, one important example we can say here, we talk about we can see that there are, in terms of development, some factors underlined. Of course, in terms of labor competency, we have engineers and managers, as well as skilled laborers and well-trained personnel and labor force. Is a significant advantage, which can take us into maybe 3 or 4 generations, especially in the basic industrial sectors. And when we talk about industrial strategies, holistic industrial strategies, or the lack thereof, which we have underlined, being the case, I can say that of course, the Green Deal and the CBAM impacting our industrial strategies, or formulating an industrial strategy, taking into consideration the Green Deal and CBAM is important, I think. And Alkım, in her opening speech, also actually underlined this took a while, and also in the SHURA reports, we see this being emphasized over and over again. And Green Deal, green transformation, energy transition, and a CBAM project and scope is significantly actually in line with Turkey's own needs for restructuring its industry. So, for example, be it EU or other developed countries, needs for strategy for transformation is different from Turkey's needs for transformation. So, in that sense, but the EU implementations recently are mostly on par with Turkey's own needs for transformation as well. As of maybe the 90s, let's say, if we continue to do what we've been doing until now, we will have lost major opportunity. And we need to therefore to prioritize the sectors and not forced development of all the industrial industries all as in a horizontal package without prioritizing. In all the projections that we have made until now, we have to look into the peculiarities of each and every industry and the pros and cons and its contributions in terms of this strategy need to be taken into account in formulating a holistic strategy. And this is what we have tried to do. But especially in we see that the current strategies also have a lot of anomalies. And so we need to have a healthy and solid transformation without wrecking and destroying what was already done. Needs to be our focus. I'm actually a little hesitant to give any examples of any sectors or industries so as not to excessify anything or to prevent misunderstanding of industry goals and strategies. But I'll give a very small example from cement industry. Cement is a product that needs to be transported very large distances in any way of transportation, either marine or land or air. And in that sense, this is a product that is not actually sustainable and then such long transport issues in the fact that it is very important for cement to be evaluated in this light, where the true commercial value needs to be highlighted with all of these pros and cons taken into consideration in that sense. Of course, in time, we have foreseen an export level that can also be foreseen, but we are actually quite hesitant on the growth of the domestic market. But on the other hand, we do note that there is this need for development, and this also, when taken into consideration, social needs and humane needs as well. We see that with this production structure, some things are being pressured, some opportunities are being restricted or repressed, so to say. And we need to also take these into consideration for any potential development of these opportunities as well with any strategy, when also taking into effect the need for construction, especially in residence and other constructions. We see that actually we do have domestic resources that can potentially be created by also focusing on the domestic manufacture and production as well. Maybe we should, I did not want to leave that unaddressed either. I think I am a little bit over time with my comments, but I would just like to say that there are studies on what the preferences should be for prioritization in that sense, in order to have a strong and solid transformation where basic industries and basic needs are put more in the foreground in order to identify potential higher potential sectors for the future. And there's some comparisons are already underway, and we could have maybe in between stages or various strategies for various prioritization. And but very roughly, I can say that at the moment, and in terms of the industries where Turkey currently has a trade advantage or a competitive advantage, and developing only these sectors as the sectors that Turkey has need of in terms of increasing capacity and increasing competitive advantage, is actually at the basis of the strategy being generated, should be at the heart of the strategy being generated, and the right of resource allocations should be made according to these main objectives, and some sub options or some secondary options and possibilities could be developed based on this main. And also other industries based on, forward linkage and backward linkage industry, intensive industries such as iron and steel and cement will be important to prioritize in the strategies, and the potential to be developed in these industries will also impact these forward linkage and backward linkage industries as well, with various stakeholders need to be taken into the process, included in the process as well, in this prioritization issue. So thank you very much from my side.
We would like to thank you, Gülay Hanım. You have mentioned really important topics. I also would like to underline, in your previous work, you always mentioned that in Turkey, with green transition, our developmental priorities are coinciding. So going to that direction is going to make us more productive and value-added industrial composition. At this point, I would like to move on to Gülizar Hanım, Gülizar Yavaş. She is the president of Green Agreement and she is actively involved in CBAM and Green Deal, and for quite a long time. And based on your work, Gülizar Hanım, on CBAM and Green Deal, what are your insights on Turkey's industrial competitiveness? What are the actions that the public and private sectors should prioritize in the short and medium terms, and what would be your recommendations to us? There are works that have been conducted for a long time, and they all say the same thing. In our Green Agreement Action Plan, we wanted to show how we are going to work on this area, and we put 81 actions. So not only related to CBAM, but directly in the industry. How are we going to provide industrial competitiveness? Therefore, we needed to study different areas. And within these areas, there are practically, of course, CBAM and sector-related topics, and that raised awareness in these sectors. But decarbonation is not only related to CBAM or carbon dependency, but we needed to study productiveness and competitiveness as well. But it's not easy to get a result by only working on the industry, especially related to the sectors that are hard to transform. The energy transition is in the center of all these. Of course, there should be a industrial strategy, and the country has to make certain prioritizations, and there should be a ranking among the sectors. And when doing these, rather than using what have been done before, Gülay Hanım said that it is important to determine these sectors from scratch. And of course, there are, as you know, different action plans and working plans are being published, but these are all lighting the path for the future and show an objective for Turkey. And when we look at Turkey's strategy for energy productivity, and we know that we have certain targets for 2030, 2040, and 2050. So in accordance to the investments that the Turkish government is going to make, the private sector is also going to contribute to these studies. And we are working on where are we going to be in renewable energy. And we also, Termak started working on hydrogen studies as well. This morning, we had the meeting with the investment department, and they said that especially in the late years, in 23-24, almost 60% of the investments made in Turkey, and in some sectors 70%, is centered around green transition and renewable energy. And various countries, Holland is the leading country, they mentioned this statistically, and Germany follows Holland in renewable energy, and probably the ones who follow this up knows about this. But as Gülay Hanım mentioned, the Turkish industry has certain features like being open to newness, being very adaptable and transitional. And this actually attracts these kinds of investments to Turkey. In the meantime, our natural resources ministry also makes a certain movement, especially in terms of security. Our first aim is to reach clean energy, but sustainability is also a very important condition for competitions. So it is important to be able to access clean energy, but it is also very important to access this energy on a relatively available price. These studies have started even before we became a part of the Paris Agreement. So even though we are not working under a single strategy, we are working from different perspectives related to the administrative structure of the Turkish government. So each department is working under their authorities and conditions. As you know, the climate law offer passed in the Senate, and if in 2025, if this law is accepted, it only passed the commission at the moment. It is going to be voted in the Senate, if it is accepted in 2025, by the end of 2025 and by the beginning of 2026, an emission bar commercial system will be started. So, of course, at the beginning, we will not be able to move to a carbon taxation system. We need to provide some time for the sectors, but this actually is going to bring a legal liability, and especially the sectors that are elected are CBAM sectors. This actually is going to be about the 40% of the emissions that are being followed up in Turkey. And when we look at this rate, even though the plants that it is going to cover, the number of plants is not going to be high, but the rate of the emissions is going to be high. And this actually makes us happy. And it is going to create an acceleration in terms of competitiveness. And this also is going to bring in a right in terms of the value added taxation as well. There is also another CBAM mechanism change draft that is going to be circulated, and they're preparing it. There are certain concerns and problematic parts, so they are trying to correct these and put it into circulation. And on the other side, they are gathering information since 2023 with a reporting, and they are making certain regulations and arrangements in this respect. So as Turkey, I cannot say that everything that we draw attention to is being cared for. This circulation is going to be announced to all the stakeholders, and they are going to evaluate it, and then they are going to give feedback. We also said that decarbonization is something the companies directly have to do, but the state needs to support them as well, especially in terms of cement and fertilizers. When we think about the international trade, we see that we're not going to see big impact, especially it is hard to decarbonize, especially cement. But when we look at it from the commercial side, we are not going to have a big impact. Unfortunately, because of the earthquake disaster we had, there's a high demand to the internal market, and we do not expect an improvement here. We know that our cement plants have already started their decarbonization investments with the support of the World Bank, and they are not obliged to do it at the moment, and they are not doing exportation as well. But in terms of decreasing the emissions in the country, they have started these. And our iron and steel companies also announced their investments in this area. And therefore, in the Turkish industry, in the coming period, we see that they are taking precautions, moving their investments in this area, and they have higher awareness and also certain precautions that they take. And we don't see the resistance we usually see. The sector is following up on the developments in the world, and we also follow them up and we inform them. And therefore, various countries, due to the decisions that they are going to take, would there be change in CBAM, or would there be change in the speed towards green deal, green adjustment transition, we have certain question marks, but we also know that the countries like the US have certain resistance at the beginning, but especially in the digital, in terms of digitalization, the United States first resisted the situation, but in 2 years, they have shifted their perspective and they accepted the terms of the EU. Therefore, in addition to the security and safety issues, the competitiveness is also another factor that changed their perspective as well. So therefore, regarding sustainable climate change, the resistance is going to be evaluated together with competitiveness and will be assessed differently. This is what I believe, especially the US policies, reactions to, against the EU policies have always turned around. I don't know whether the resources will flow from there, but we know that international finance companies, they have announced their 2028, 2030 strategies, and they all have in common, they share a big portion to green transition, projects, digital projects, especially they include the ESG criteria, and therefore there will be accessible and suitable finance from this area as well. So no matter what the country's general policies are, maybe it can be slow due to the bureaucracy, but big investors, big industry is unlikely to come back from here, because in the industry, any place that you are going to go, even though you don't have a political target, you always have to make new investments in order to increase your competitiveness. Otherwise, you cannot be competitive. So at this point where we are, as Diana mentioned, the majority of the industrial investments are a lot younger than the European investments, but they also have to update themselves. This is the time to update. So the finance is flowing towards green transition, and as they will be able to access money from there, even though they want it or not, they have to put more environmental, more green objectives, and they have to shift their perspectives towards that area. And maybe this can create some problems, challenges at the beginning, because there are some countries that did not change their direction to this. There are some countries who keep their resistance in this respect, but this is a reality that about 40%, we have a 40% export market, but we believe that they are going to make, EU is going to make it even tougher. Maybe the delays are going to be only 1 or 2 years, but it doesn't mean that they are going to annul all the laws, because the sector has a very important pressure on the Commission, especially regarding the commercial precautions. They are unable to reach the targets, especially the steel sector. They state that only the protection precautions is not enough, and there needs to be other precautions taken about decarbonization, and including the other sectors as well. So we believe that the EU sectors are not going to give up on this request, and therefore the Commission is going to keep the rules tight, and we don't believe that they are going to leave this area. And therefore, we are updating our own green agreement action plan. And I hope that with a wider perspective, we can include just transition, educational development, and sustainability. We are waiting for such a great action plan. Thank you very much, Gülizar. This was really comprehensive and included and evaluated developments as well. And I am sure the other panelists will mention, we'll talk about these in the second run as much as our time allows. Now I would like to give the floor to Muammer Bilgiç. He is he is a director in the CBAM sector, in the iron and steel sector for long years. As a producer in the iron and steel sector, what is your view on the impact of CBAM and Green Deal on your sector's competitiveness, and what are the critical points in your sector's transformation? Thank you very much, Yael. I would like you to turn on my camera, please. If they could turn on my camera, I would appreciate it. You can start, Muammer, and we can then turn on your camera. So, how do we perceive CBAM and Green Deal on the iron and steel sector's competitiveness? This is a really good question. Zero carbon is a very long journey, and the competitiveness parameters are really important. And where are we on the process? This is also very essential. We should not take a look at it just only as a table. So this is we are actually in an era where we transform really fastly. Decarbonization is a new type of energy, and there are new production technologies linked to them. And these are some technical parts. So product design, productive life cycle, and new industrial ways of living. So with the emission limits CBAM requires, the difference between these numbers are being calculated, and the CAPEX and OPEX, they are going to determine our competitiveness. So there are certain borders, emission borders, the EU states, and there are certain investments that we need to do, and certain changes in processes, and the regularity and compliance pressures are going to be key challenges for our competitiveness. So in this journey, in the steel sector, there is no single roadmap for all the players. As you know, 30% of Turkey is using fossil, and the other 70% is using not raw materials, but recyclable materials. partial electrification, total electrification. These are really important. And it is a very problematic for our integrated plants as well. And for a long time, our steel producers are produced via electric arc furnaces, and we are unable to attend to the cyber necessities, and it is going to be local at the moment. And maybe for the current international markets, decarbonization processes are going to be adapted. They will. So because of the expansion of CBAM, it is really important to follow up on the new developments, and it is really important to because in EU there is a very radical change, and because of this change, there are very low emission rates, and it is really hard to keep them. And the change, the acceleration of this change will need to be equal to the acceleration of the.
The details of CBAM similar products or processes are not clear yet, so we cannot say anything definite for those markets. But for our industries can be present in those markets for a certain period of time, but it is clear that we should be aware that the whole world is going through a similar transformation, so they will come up with similar processes. And we have also scrap industry, and it's another industry working with power, with electricity. So it's also an energy issue there. What we call decarbonization in general is mainly an issue of energy transition. Distancing ourselves from fossil fuels and also reducing the carbon footprint in terms of electricity. There's a main issue. So for the 70% where we don't seem to have any issues, we have basic energy issues as well. And of course, our values in terms of emissions are double the size of EU, more than 500 gram per kilowatt, and similar values are actually unacceptable because UK, for example, has 100, and this is and for EU in general, this is double their values, and this is. Of course, the solution of the problems of the grid are unfortunately moving towards not the right form because our performance barometer is actually the ratio of these decarbonized issues in terms of whole. But that's not the solution. We need to look at where the carbon footprint of the entire grid is. And how is this reflected on the manufacturer and the consumer? Because the grid carbon footprint and the green certificates they get from the system or investments for electricity for new constructions and new homes. And this will actually determine solutions based on the scope 2 issues that we have in terms of energy efficiency and carbon low energy utilization. And these are important also for industries such as iron and steel. And so the investment and transformations that this sector is going to do and will also determine their compatibility with CBAM and their competitiveness and competitive power in terms of CBAM. So, and we have high figures for scope 2 as well as scope 3 emissions, and rising up to 40%. 40% and 40% emissions resulting from grid is very extraordinary. It means that rather than the producers, the entire economy has to follow up. This means that there is a significant need for capex in this regard, from this perspective, be it capex undertaken by the manufacturers in iron and steel or the national budget. In terms, it's very significant. It's going to be one of the main indicators of iron and steel because it's an energy intensive industry, and there's a great need for energy for this industry in general, and the total electrification of this industry means a significant amount of used electricity. So the journey there is not a very easy one in terms of competitiveness. And we can say it's not significant to say we use only scraps or we use this type of furnaces. So there's unfortunately a lot of things to be debated at the moment. We see that 42% of our production comes from renewable resources and 59% of the capacities come from that. And we went for, so 42% actually is here what actually brings forth the cost of there. So energy cost and raw material and will be the most important indicators of competitiveness in that sense. Let's say there is an energy style with a lot of about 0% emissions and solar and winds. But even in the actual cost, if that rise increases to 30% or 40% in a developed country, in our country, this must be a little lower, but still the cost is there. So this energy or commodity, let's say, with low cost is actually $85 per consumers in terms of cost. This is something that we need to focus on. So because carbon footprint on its own is not significant, we're going to have to focus on the energy needs and increasing energy capacity, and will also make it significant that it's actually the costs are reduced. We have a hydrogen action plan at there. So to be competitive, hydrogen prices need to be quite below the electricity prices, as well as the costs need to be below the electricity costs as well. At the moment, we have in Sweden facilities being established, which is actually focusing only on hydrogen, and they are receiving electricity at a price of $20, where with us, the price of electricity is $85. If they can do it, we have to be able to do it more significantly. And this has to do with the grid, with the conduction of the electricity, with all the other factors as well. And what we see here is that both for those who are manufacturing based on renewable resources and the others, we have to be aware that electricity prices will not be reduced here no matter what we do, because at the moment there is still the burden of fossil fuels, the cost of fossil fuels that we have to still carry on our shoulders, and the advantages that we get from renewable sources only come to compensate for this burden. Another resource is nuclear in that sense, when we look at the costs that is promised, so to say. And it shows us that the electricity cost will not be reduced to figures below the current figures for a long time, even with the assumptions of nuclear. This is a significant issue. The emission value of electricity, the cost of electricity will be the main determining factor for our competitiveness in the future, because some sectors need to be fully electrified, and this electrification is very necessary but very costly. And another sector also comprises 70% of our consumers, and there's 35 or 40% of the total emissions are also coming from the grid, from the electricity grid, also in these sectors as well. And this is in the future is going to make us the country with the highest cost for electricity. Not currently, because at the moment they're in the EU, still countries with higher electricity prices than us, but they have a different dynamic there. So in that sense, there's another factor that's important for this, and that's the sufficiency of raw materials, because we are one of the major importers of raw material in the world, and in our integrated factories and facilities, we process these raw materials. And this is we have some domestic resources, but it's not sufficient. We have more raw materials to be used with electric furnaces, and we need more ore sourced products as well in that sense. This is a process in generally that needs about 7 times more electricity to be utilized, and this requires a significant capex and opex. And one of the major reasons this capex and opex is so high has to do with the price of electricity. So the price of electricity is going to be significant in the coming years. And in that sense, there we have an old paradigm which indicates that a demand security of supply in energy is most important. Unfortunately, the world is now moving towards this actually paradigm, and so security is not the only issue. The emissions and the cost are also significant, and it's going to be one of the major indicators of cost. Unfortunately, we are not touching upon this in our action plans. Our goals only, we only have the 2053 net zero target, no sub targets, no intermediary or in between targets. And this is very important. I underline it once more because it's going to be very important, and we definitely have to undertake this paradigm shift to be able to cope with this, because electricity in our 300-year civilization, turning from our basic fossil fuels to electricity is going to actually create a consumption request and demand, which needs to be met before this transformation. And apart from that, though, things that we could, I'm sorry, Muammer, Mr. Could you be a little bit more shorter, so we have time for the second round as well. So actually sustainability, life cycle assessment, long-term circular economy, and circular efficiency are topics that do not require capex, but will have a tremendous impact on this transformation. I think they need to not be overlooked either. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Muammer Bilgiç, especially on the energy sector, and your underlined comments about the emissions are actually the basis of our work in SHURA as well, as you know, and this taken in hand in relationship with the competitiveness is very important. Now we want to go on to our world tour. We will continue with Eleanor Matillet, and she is from Agora Industry, a think tank. She's a climate neutral industry project manager. I would like to ask you, Eleanor, that you have as a member of European Energy Transition think tank, what are your views on the recent debates on European industrial competitiveness and the European Green Deal, including CBAM? These are things that Gülizar also talked about at part. And on one side, we have competitiveness. On the other side, we have the Green Deal. Is that the way to move forward right now? But how can these different views be reconciled? What are your takes on this?
Thank you, Yael, for the question, and thank you for the invitation. Let me first take a step back. When we look at the whole debate on industrial competitiveness, which sectors in the EU are actually at risk? Not all sectors are at risk. when we talk about industrial competitiveness. On the global stage, obviously, commodities that are traded on the international global market, like steel and aluminum, are more exposed than others, such as cement and electricity. Also, one thing to remember is that the green premium, which is the markup consumers would have to pay on green products vis-a-vis the conventional product, vary greatly depending on the product. So, for example, for green steel, this increases the final price of a car by around 2%. While with some plastics, we could see much higher prices increases, like, for example, with polyethylene, which could increase by about 8%. When we look at the EU level, industrial production of particularly energy and electricity intensive goods, such as green steel and green hydrogen, could very well relocate, but we also expect these new investments to happen in EU countries benefiting from low power prices. We have seen this already with the first auctioning round of the EU's Hydrogen Bank, in which all the winning bids actually originate from the Iberian Peninsula in Spain or the Nordics, that are areas with competitive renewable energy sources. So this suggests also within the EU a strong investment pool effects from renewable availability. Now, having said that, and coming back to your question on reconciling industrial competitiveness and our climate agenda, you're well aware now that we have a new commission in the EU, and since the commission took office, the direction is very clear. Climate neutrality is here to stay, but the political framing has shifted. There is a broad consensus that climate action is essential for European strategic interests because it means ensuring security, prosperity, and also long-term competitiveness. But at the same time, there is indeed quite a big political pressure to implement the Green Deal in a more flexible manner. Yesterday, actually, the Commission released two major proposals, so their first initiatives that help us understand their views on how to reconcile both of those priorities, the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Energy Action Plan. And the proposals at the moment seem quite sensible and pragmatic for the short term. And in principle, they also show us a positive strategic framework for the coming years. What's important is that the Clean Deal is clearly embedded in the necessary climate policy framework. And currently, the proposal specifically mentions the upcoming EU's 2040 target of reducing emissions by 9%. That's still to be discussed, but it's good that it's mentioned there. And it also mentioned a cross-sectoral target for electrification to increase by 32% by 2030. So the climate policy framework remains, and it's important to actively seek synergies between industrial competitiveness and climate action. And this means investing in the right areas where we can have those synergies. Now I'll highlight 5 priorities, and I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into all of them. But the first, securing EU infrastructure fit for a net zero future. The second, leveraging demand to scale up lead markets for green materials. Third, and it's also part of the event today, an effective implementation of CBAM as an anti-carbon leakage mechanism. Fourth, investment support for climate neutral processes. And finally, mainstreaming also circular economy incentives. So let me go back to the first one, securing EU infrastructure that is fit for a net zero future. Energy prices, and I think that's already been mentioned by the previous panelists, represent key competitiveness issues for Europe currently. The EU wholesale gas prices are around 5 times higher than the US on average, and electricity prices are on average twice as high. And now with the Trump presidency, we can expect this gap to widen in the coming years. So as long as the EU remains reliant on expensive fossil gas, energy prices will stay high. And here, clean electrification is the main option for Europe to achieve its triple objective of competitiveness, climate action, and security. Electrification really enables industry to tap into low-cost, domestically produced renewable energy, and this already accounts for nearly half of Europe's power generation, renewable energy. But currently, the rates for electrification have leveled off at approximately a quarter of final energy consumption over the past years. So it's really crucial that the EU drives the electrification of end-use sectors. We published a study last year looking at the technical potential of electrification, and we see that these are very significant. So 90% of industrial energy demand that is yet not electrified could be met through direct electrification technologies that are expected to be available in 2035, so in 10 years. But we also have technologies that are readily available today, like heat pumps and electric arc furnaces, that can already deliver more than 60% of this demand. So it's really crucial that the EU really drives this electrification agenda and puts in place the right financing, but also policy framework to scale up those technologies. Currently, that's part of the Clean Industrial Deal, although it remains a very broad narrative. And it remains a bit unclear how the EU is planning to set up this stable financial and policy framework for electrification. A second aspect that's linked with energy and infrastructure is currently there's still, we see in the Clean Industrial Deal, a short-term emphasis on securing fossil gas supplies. And this really risks undermining the ambition of the Green Deal. Prioritizing lower gas prices brings uncertain results, and it also creates an unfavorable environment for electrification. And at the same time, we've seen this before, investing in overseas gas infrastructure could also lock Europe into the very fossil fuel dependencies that it's trying to break free from. So instead, investments must be channeled into clean technologies that can help build a more resilient and climate neutral future. And that's at the same time also trying to strike the balance between addressing short-term energy costs and staying the course on the Green Deal. So really that's where competitiveness should not come at the expense of climate action and where we see some risks. Now, looking at the second priority, scaling up demand for green materials. Industry, so if we look at the revision of the ETS regulation, industries in the EU have until 2040 to reach net zero. But companies in the sectors such as steel, cement, and chemicals may still hesitate to make their production facilities fit for climate neutrality because of the high upfront costs. So it's important there that governments dedicate policy measures to help driving up demand in the end sectors for climate-friendly products. And that's creating need markets. And that really helps boosting the business case for rapid decarbonization. In the EU, for example, 60% of the materials from those energy-intensive sectors go into buildings, construction, packaging, and mobility. Yet the demand from these end-use sectors for green material remains really insufficient. This is partly understood by the Commission and by policymakers, and they are working on developing more resilient and sustainability criteria, for example, for green public procurement, which is one way to leverage that demand. They're also working on harmonizing labels of what we define green materials. But there we also need ambitious and swift implementation. That's also what industries, manufacturing industries in Europe are asking for. It's also important here to find the right balance between resilience and trade, because we also need to scale up global markets for green goods globally. And the final priority, which is also the topic of today on CBAM, ensuring the effective implementation of CBAM. You might have seen the Commission made recently proposals on simplification of CBAM for importers. So for example, it includes an exemption for some small importers. But at the same time, the revision still ensures that 99% of the embedded emissions of imports are still covered. This is helpful to help with compliance of CBAM rolling out, but ultimately, what really matters is that CBAM must drive global emission reductions. Well, CBAM, not only the EU CBAM, but also other carbon leakage, anti-carbon leakage mechanisms that are being implemented. And they also need to ensure a level playing field in the industrial transformation. So the real debate on strengthening CBAM is still ahead. The Commission is still set to review several key aspects that are part of the current CBAM regulation after the summer. And these discussions will really address fundamental challenges, including expanding CBAM to indirect emissions. And this is a crucial step to prevent resource shuffling, and also finding a solution for exports. Looking into indirect emissions, including indirect emissions will make sense, as many energy-intensive industrial processes will need to gradually become electrified. And currently, indirect emissions related to electricity consumption still vary greatly between EU and non-EU countries. So the inclusion of indirect emissions, so Scope 2 emissions, would help ensuring that foreign producers did not electrify their energy sources using CO2-intensive power sources to escape the CBAM costs at the EU's border. So without the coverage, some of the most important incentives for foreign processes improvements are still missing. And the second aspect on the question of exports, we believe that question needs to be addressed, as carbon leakage is still a major problem for EU exported-oriented industries, because they don't have the ability to pass through the cost of carbon to their consumers as they're competing with global consumers on the global market. And this is relevant as exports are about 15% of the production of CBAM sectors in the EU. So first, obviously, to tackle this, advancing carbon pricing across the world should be the priority. And amongst the major destination countries for EU goods, several of those countries, including Turkey, have introduced or introducing their own carbon markets. But we can't expect similar prices, similar level of carbon pricing in those more nascent schemes. And most of the dedications in the short time, just as the EU did in its own ETS, will be given for free. So in this context, I would say that an export adjustment mechanism is needed to really help, help support financially export-oriented sectors. And finally, just touching upon investment supports for climate-neutral processes. As you know, many industrial facilities have urgent reinvestment needs. So in the EU, for example, more than 70% of the EU's coal-powered iron-making assets require investment before 2030. So there we really need more targeted funding from national member states, from EU funding, and also crowding out private funding. So to conclude, as we see clear economic headwinds and geopolitical tensions, the current proposals of the Commission to bring together the important objectives of industrial competitiveness and climate action send a welcome message for what's about to come from the EU's perspective. We see that we can find ways in which both objectives not only coexist, but they also reinforce each other. But the ultimate test in the EU will be translating those proposals into concrete actions, obviously, and also backed by a robust financial foundation. We also know private capital will drive much of the investment needed, but you still need strategic public financing to catalyze this shift. And their governments also need to ensure that new investments are compatible with climate neutrality. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. This was really good. You have mentioned really good points. All the panelists emphasized this, and it was really interesting. Net zero continues, especially Europe is sticking to these targets. But of course, there are some different applications. There might be some different applications. And the situation of the exporters in Europe and the competitiveness in Europe, the adaptation of these differences were really interesting for me to hear. I would like to move on to our last panelist here. We are probably going to exceed our timing a little bit, but this is a very interesting meeting for us. We are going to Rosana Dos Santos. She is a managing director of Transition Energetica, an institution in Brazil about energy transition. And she is going to tell us about as a member of a dynamic developing country, what is your perspective on the relationship between the Green Deal and industrial development in Brazil, and what are some of the strategies under discussion? Please.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here. All this discussion is like it energizes me, if I may say. Well, coming from Brazil, which is a completely different reality from what you guys have in Europe, and understanding that Europe is also different realities from east to west and from north to south. So I come from a country that has different natural characteristics, natural resources, the way our population is distributed along the country, how the sun shines here, the quality of the wind resources that we have. So we do come from a different reality, but I'll start my intervention with a reflection that I've been making for some times now. Every country, every geography tries to do and seeks to do the best for its citizens, for its population. This is normal from any politician or from any of us. Problem with that is that sometimes the present gains or the immediate gains that you get jeopardizes any future added value or any future, any lower emissions future. And this is, from my perspective, this is exactly where the discussion lies. Because if you want to get to net zero, we do not have enough tools to get there. What I mean by that is that in order to prove that we can get to net zero with the existing way of thinking and technologies, that is the mainstream technologies, meaning either you electrify or you use hydrogen, you have to disconsider completely scope 2 and scope 3 from the equation. So those two scopes, they just disappeared from the equation so that we can prove to the world that we will solve the problem of scope 3 and scope 2 is not on the table. And the issue is, practically speaking and thermodynamically speaking, if you take into account scope 3 and scope 2, what we are planning as decarbonization pathways for the rest of the world is not enough. It's not getting us there. What I mean is that beyond electrification or hydrogen, we do have to consider other technological pathways, mainly using biogenic carbon, meaning biofuels, biomethane, biochar, and things that us from the global south can provide in a cheaper way, in a more advanced tier also from a technological point of view, it's not as futuristic as using or electrifying everything. So I think a combo of everything will have to come to the table and will have to be discussed. So I understand Europe going full into electrification, inclusive vehicles and so on, because there is not enough space, there is not enough sun, there is not enough wind to produce the biogenic carbon that we from the global south, meaning global south, I hate this name, but global south meaning us from the south, I don't know. So I think we have as a society, and I think this environment that we are here, we can better discuss. We are think tanks, we have to think. So as think tanks, I think this is the right place for us to challenge ourselves and not do only a copy and paste from the past discussions and try to do something different from now on. Different in terms of technology, different in terms of geopolitical negotiations among our countries, and different because we do have a very challenging reality ahead of us, which is the Trump administration in the US and what happened now in Germany, which is completely challenging for our climate agenda, for our climate community, challenging in terms, how are we going to deal with that? So in this sense, I just wanted to do this kind of a rough introduction to my way of thinking so that I can lend the grounds for what I'm saying next. Looking to my country, looking into our resources, Brazil has already a grid, an electricity grid that is 90% or above renewable. So we have 230 gigawatts of installed capacity, from which 110 is hydro, another 40 is solar, 40 is wind, and there is a bit of biomass, electricity from biomass, and the rest is fossil fuel, mainly natural gas. So we do have a lot of renewables, good quality renewables, that we can run our grid between 80 and 90% renewables every year. So the question here for us is not investing more or continuing investing in renewables, of course, but it's not a matter of increasing the amount of electricity coming from renewables in the grid. But the question for us are twofold. First, to safeguard this renewability of our grid against the fossil fuel industry. And secondly, to profit from the fact that we are already renewable and help the world with the decarbonization of our own industry and exports from our geography to the rest of the world, either the finalized product or an intermediate product, but something that gives value to the fact that the Brazilian society has already invested a lot in getting here where we are right now. And this is why I'm saying that scope 2 matters, because when CBAM does not consider scope 2, it's just ruling out our production, our greener production from the equation. And again, I don't think we will get to net zero if we continue thinking in our own geographies and our own way. And Eleanor, I loved your intervention as well, because competitiveness, industry competitiveness is at stake here, because if we right now protect the European industry by disconsidering scope 2 or scope 3 and sticking only to scope 1, for example, this will of course protect the European industry for now, but what is the competitiveness of the European industry in the near future if we get that? What I mean is that is it clever for Europe to import hydrogen, import minerals, and do the steel making in your own geography? Or it's more clever to import intermediate materials or even steel plates from Turkey, for example, and do the best automobile industry you can in your geography and get those vehicles to compete in a greener market in the future. So this is I'm really kind of challenging here, because it's also something that I'm trying to incubate in our decision makers here in the country, here in Brazil, that the way to go is to position Brazil and other countries as a supplier of greener solutions and not a supplier of iron ore or ammonia or soybeans or cotton. So supplier of something with a higher and a greater added value. If we do that, we share the green premium, we share the wealth, and we help the world to do what I call just transition. So CBAM has a central role in fostering this kind of wealth distribution, in maintaining European competitiveness and also adding value in other geographies. In the beginning of Lula's administration here in 2023, the government launched what they call the New Industry Brazil. It's Nova Indústria Brasil in Portuguese, New Industry Brazil. Which is the intention to revert a very, very weird process that we been facing here in Brazil since the 80s, which is the decrease of the participation of the industry in our gross domestic product. In the 80s, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, industry was responsible for almost 40% of our GDP. Nowadays, it's around 10%. And what is worse is that together with this decrease in participation, nominal decrease in participation, we had also a decrease in the complexity of what we produce. And as this complexity decreases, it also concentrates wealth, because lesser complexity means more concentrated wealth. And this comes to the discussion here as a platform or a way to revert the situation and link climate action with development in a very good way. And then perhaps we will get to net zero somewhere after 2050, but somewhere near 2050, if we prove that together with the decarbonization process, we can bring also development and wealth to other geographies apart from the already industrialized geographies, meaning it's a little bit of a spread of the supply chains all around the globe. So this conversation, of course, we do have to have also with China. It's not only Europe that is it's in question here. We do have to have this conversation also with China. But I do not see how to get to net zero if we do not share the burden and we do not share the wealth. So by doing that, we can convince governments all around the globe that it's a good idea to go for any kind of climate action. And again, I think Europe set the standard, and many countries in the world are already going into some kind of CBAM, or at least were going into some kind of CBAM. And I think Europe has a leading role to provide a mechanism that can help us to get to net zero, and not only be a protectionism mechanism that protects its own geography, which I understand. I'm not against. I also want to protect my own geography, but we have to go beyond that. So what we see is that perhaps something that we could build together, and by the way, just brackets here in my speech, we are starting here with Brazil and Mexico, the same kind of study that SHURA conducted for Turkey. So we are starting here. So we will have some results very shortly, I hope, that also can be presented, and we will do some kind of similar event to announce and to launch the report for Brazil and Mexico. So what I see is that the opportunity that we have right now is that both the G20, COP, and BRICS is still under the control of climate-friendly governments. I do not know if my government is actually climate-friendly. I'm kind of trying to understand, but at least they are not against. So COP will be in Brazil, G20 in South Africa. Brazil has the BRICS presidency this year. So it's a huge opportunity for us to present which would be a mechanism that would allow us to get to net zero. Going into specifically into the CBAM rules as of today, I see this matter of the scope 2 and scope 3 that we should.
Rosana,
what you say is very exciting and very nice, but I have some concerns about the time. Can we wrap up and then maybe we can hear one or two final statements from everyone, because we've discussed very great topics, and what you say about Brazil made us think of our own country as well. I am going to give you the floor again, if you could wrap up.
No, I'm just wrapping up. I think those are multilateral opportunities for us to have a serious discussion on where are we going with this mechanism. And I do believe that CBAM set the floor. It's a good mechanism. So my final comments is one on fertilizers that I saw the Turkish colleagues mentioning. Brazil is the second largest importer of nitrogen fertilizers, and the first greatest exporter of food and grains. So we are the second largest importers of nitrogen from Russia. So we do have a huge opportunity there to do our own fertilizers here in country. And secondly, this CBAM and several of the rules, the certification rules that are inside CBAM do not account for other technological pathways of getting to the same place, decarbonizing. I mean, if we go broader, we can go faster and we can go cheaper if we broaden the technologies and the solutions that are accepted by CBAM. The way it is today is just a burden. It's not helping our industry and will not help us to get and meet the green world that we want. And on the other hand, we will continue by doing that. We will continue fostering dirty industry because nobody will get to the level of certifications that is required at the price that it is required. I'll stop here and then I'll go. I'll leave the floor for the colleagues and for the final remarks.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Rosana, gerçekten dinlerken benim Türkiye ile paralellikler çok dikkatimi çekti. Ama şunu da söylemem lazım. Evet, gereken sanayi dönüşümünü çok güzel bir şekilde ifade ettiniz. Türkiye'de tabii bizim aynı zamanda enerjide de daha fazla yenilenebilire doğru gitmemiz gerekiyor. Hani o açıdan bir gıptayla baktığımızı söyleyebilirim. Şimdi şöyle yapalım isterseniz. Süremizi aştık ama çok fazla konu konuştuk ve herkesin böyle bir cümleyle en azından son bir mesaj vermesini istiyorum. Bu arada şeylere baktım, soru cevaplara baktım. Birçoğunu aslında konuşmacılar yanıtlamış oldu. Ama onun dışında aklınıza gelen bir şeyler olursa her zaman bize e-postayla ulaşabilirsiniz Şura'dan. Şimdi ben tekrar döngüyü başlatarak Gülay Hanım'a dönmek istiyorum. Nedir bize son mesajımız bugün?
Ya şöyle çalışmada da hani vurgulanıyor ama sanayi stratejisi oluşturulmasından aslında kastım imalat sanayi kompozisyonunun karbonsuzlaşmayı da destekleyecek biçimde hızlı dönüşümü. Yani imalat sanayi çünkü sadece enerji verimliliği, karbonsuzlaşma yatırımları ya da yenilenebilir enerji yatırımları yeterli değil. Hali hazırda zaten karbon emisyonu düşük ya da çok hızlı karbonsuzlaşmanın çok düşük yatırımlarla sağlanabileceği sektörlerde büyüme, bu sektörlerin ağırlık taşıdığı bir kompozisyona doğru yönelim, başka faydaları da var tabii ki, kritik. Bu bağlamda bir soruyu da yanıtlamak istiyorum. Soru cevapta gördüğüm. Şimdi bu doğrultuda bir kompozisyon projekte edildiğinde çalışan başına katma değer artışı sağlanabiliyor. Yani orada mevcut şeyler, sektör, imalat sanayi alt sektörlerinde gördüğümüz ortalama katma değerleri kullandık. Sadece kompozisyon değişiyor, o değişimden gelen bir artış söz konusu. Çok teşekkür ederim tüm katılımcılara.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Gülizar Hanım, sizin son mesajınızı alabilir miyiz?
Aslında biz Brezilya'nın sunumunda endişelerimizin benzer olduğunu gördük. Zaten bizim hem Avrupa Komisyonu'na hem DTÖ'ye hem Birleşmiş Milletler'e verdiğimiz ülke pozisyon belgelerimizde bu hususların hepsine değiniyoruz. Yani iklim değişikliğiyle mücadele, iklimin doğası nedeniyle tek başına herhangi bir ülke veya coğrafyanın gerçekleştiremeyeceği bir yükümlülük aslında. Dolayısıyla burada eğer ticaret kanallarında bir sekteye uğrama söz konusu olursa finansman mekanizmaları bozulacak. Bu bozulan finansman mekanizmaları esasen pek çok ülkenin iklime uyumlu hale gelmekle ilgili politikalarını gerçekleştirmesine, iklim hedeflerini gerçekleştirmesine engel olacak. Dolayısıyla bu tek başına Avrupa Birliği'nin de düşünemediği bir husus değil esasen. Ama son dönemde Avrupa Birliği tarafından yayınlanan belgelerin hepsine baktığımızda, bunu üst düzeyli toplantılarda da söylüyoruz, bakanlar düzeyinde de söyleniyor. O yüzden burada da rahatlıkla ifade edebilirim. Özellikle yeni sanayi, işte temiz üretimle ilgili bir yasa ve strateji açıkladılar. Kritik ham maddeler açıklandı. Rekabetçilikle ilgili bir pusula hazırladılar, yayınladılar. En son çevreyle ilgili önlem diye başlayan SKDM gibi iklimle ilgili bütün önlemler aslında tek bir komiserin altında birleştirildi. Trade Commissioner oradan da sorumlu olacak. Biz ta başından beri çevre ve iklimle ilgili yaptığımız düzenlemelerin hepsi aslında uluslararası ticaret önlemidir. Doğrudan ticaret zincirlerinde kırılmaya neden olacak. Dolayısıyla ticaret kısmını çalışmadan iklim çalışamazsınız diyorduk. Geldiğimiz noktada bu ikisini birleştirerek aslında bunu böyle çalışmaları gerektiğini de kendileri kabul etmiş oldular. Çünkü sadece uluslararası etkisi yok, AB üzerinde de etkisi var. Yani SKDM'nin tek başına getirdiği etki diğer ülkelerde birer karbon fiyatlaması yapılmasıysa, şimdi AB sektörlerinden şu taleplerin geldiğini görüyoruz. İyi, hoş da onlar da karbon fiyatı ödemeye başladıklarında kendi ülkelerinde benim ihracatım daha da pahalı hale gelecek. Yani benim AB'den aldığım ham madde giderek pahalanacak. Niye? Çünkü bir ETS kurarsam ben bir de SKDM kurmak zorundayım artık. Kendi karbon kaçağımı engellemek için. Dolayısıyla AB diğer ülkelerle alışverişlerinde karbon fiyatlamalarına kendi ihracatının maruz kalacağı kısmını çok çalışmış görünmüyor. Sadece karbon fiyatlaması değil, bu karbon fiyatlamasına eşlik edecek raporlama, doğrulama vesaire gibi bürokratik ve diğer finansal yükümlülükler de aslında, çünkü orada da bir kapasite artışına gitmesi gerekiyor firmanın. Şimdi bizim bütün firmalarımız raporlama için ekip oluşturdular, yeni hizmetler, danışmanlıklar satın aldılar. Doğrulama yapmak zorunda kalacaklar, bunları satın alacaklar. Bunların hepsi maliyete ekleniyor. Dolayısıyla bu maliyetlerin hepsini AB tarafındaki ihracatçı da, yani bizim ülkemize girerken katlanmak zorunda kalmalı. Çünkü ben hem ETS hem SKDM yükümlülüğü altında kalıyorsam AB pazarına girerken, o da benim pazarıma girerken benzer yükümlülüklerle karşı karşıya kalmak zorunda. Dolayısıyla bu, eğer Rosana'nın bahsettiği gibi bütün dünyaya yayılacak, yani karın da bu dönüşümün getireceği iyi tarafların da paylaşılabileceği bir yönteme doğru gitmez ise aslında çevre görünümlü ticaret savaşlarına gider. Dolayısıyla bunu biz her türlü hem teknik toplantılarda hem uluslararası belgelerimizde hem de üst düzeyli toplantılarımızda komisyonun ilgili birimlerine, üst düzey yetkililerine, parlamentolara hepsine iletiyoruz. Bu alanı bu şekilde çalışmanız gerekiyor. Sadece AB'nin rekabetçiliği alanından çalışırsanız çevreyle ilgili hükümleri, ki rekabetçilik raporunda iklimle ilgili her cümle rekabetçiliğe bağlanıyor.
Evet.
Dolayısıyla
Evet.
çevresel etkiler neredeyse çalışılması bırakılmış gibi görünüyor. Hatta sorularda şey vardı, karbon capture'la ilgili bir şey çalışıyoruz, teşvik var mı diye. Şimdi bu yeni getirilen teknolojilerin de önümüzdeki dönem çevresel etkileri çalışılmamış durumda. Yani bu yenilenebilir enerji dediğimiz, temiz enerji dediğimiz enerjilerin, bunların üretim tekniklerinin, karbon capture gibi yeni yöntemlerin veya bu elektrifikasyonun gerektirdiği kritik, nadir, stratejik ham maddelere erişim zorluklarının, buralarda yeni madenler mi açılacak? Yani bunların çevresel etkileri ne olacak? Bunlar çalışılmıyor. Yani AB tarafında da çalışılmıyor. Sadece herkesi bir tarafa doğru bir iteleme var. Biz tabii ki yeni gelişmelere adapte olmak üzere Türk kamu sektörü olarak gözümüzü açık tutuyoruz ve nerede ne oluyor biz kendimizi nasıl hazırlarız? Evet, ama bu demek değil ki bize dayatılan her teknolojiyi hemen alacağız. 3 gün sonra elimizde o teknolojinin kirlilikleriyle de kalmak istemiyoruz açıkçası. Dolayısıyla o stratejiler çalışılırken hem özel sektörle hem sivil toplum kuruluşlarıyla çok geniş kapsamlı çalışılıyor ve herhangi bir teknolojiye bağımlılık yaratabilecek, herhangi bir teknolojinin sonraki etkilerinin çalışılmadığı alanlarda çok hızlı harekete geçip hemen teşvikler vesaire çıkarıp o alanda bir kirlilik, bir teknoloji çöplüğü, bir bağımlılık yaratmamak üzerine çabalıyoruz. Sanırım Rosana da aynı durumda. Brezilya'da bu şekilde çalışmaya çalışıyordur ya da diğer ülkelerde. Yani biz yeşil dönüşüm için ön alalım, evet rekabetçiliğimizi sağlayalım, iklim hedeflerimize ulaşalım istiyoruz. Ama iklim hedeflerimize uzun dönemde zarar verecek olan bir takım bugünlük geleceğin ne olacağını bilmediğimiz stratejiler, yönlendirmeler vesaireler konusunda da biraz dikkatli gitmeyi düşünüyoruz açıkçası.
Kesinlikle, kesinlikle.
Benim son söyleyeceğim bu olur. Teşekkürler.
Çok teşekkür ederiz Gülizar Hanım. Gerçekten konuyu çok etraflı bir şekilde ele almış olduk. Muammer Bey, sizin sektörünüz açısından son mesajınızı alabilir miyiz? 1-2 dakika.
Tabii izninizle sektör açısından değil genel bir yorum yapayım.
Hı hı.
Belki biliniyordur. Thomas S. Kuhn bir MIT bilim felsefesi profesörüdür. Dünyadaki gelişmeleri açıklarken paradigma değişimleri ve paradigmanın krizi tanımlarını kullanır. Ben de 300 yıllık endüstrimize, sanayimize, uygarlığımızın bir paradigma krizi içerisinde olduğunu ama bu paradigma krizinin bir süre devam edeceğini ve yeni paradigmanın gelmesi gerektiğini söyleyeceğim. Bu şu demektir. Biz dünün terminolojisiyle yarını oluşturamayacağız. Yani dün dediğimiz kârdır, büyümedir ve ne diyorsak, dün ne diyorsak kaynak kullanımı, enerji kullanımı, kapasitedir, büyüme değerleridir ne diyorsak bunlar geçmişte kalmıştır. Bizim yeni bir paradigmaya ihtiyacımız vardır. Bu paradigmanın bir numaralı ögesi varlık kaynak kullanımının şeyidir. Daha adil, daha az hoyratçı olmasıdır. Büyüme rakamsal büyüme değil, paylaşılacak büyümenin kriteri şey değildir, yüzdesel büyüme değildir. Büyümenin kriteri daha adil paylaşım olması gerekir. Fazla kapasite doğanın gereksiz yere yüklenmesidir. Çelik sektörü için söyleyeceğim. Toplamda %30 fazla kapasite vardır. Yüzlerce milyon ton fazla kapasite olağanüstü yanlış bir şeydir. Bu dünündü. Bundan sonra bunun olmaması gerekir. Türkiye için bir örnek vereceğim. Türkiye'de büyüme klasik enerji yoğun sektörlerdeki büyümenin çok ciddi değerlendirilmesi gerekir. Çin 3 yıl önce büyüme ile ilgili bir tanımlama yapmıştır. Emisyonla ilgili bir tanımlama yapmıştır. Enerji yoğun ve emisyon yoğun sektörlerde gereksiz düşük katma değerli üretimlerden çıkılması gerektiğini söylemiştir. Bizim için aynı şey söz konusudur. Bu çelikte de fazla kapasite vardır. Çimentoda da tüm ülkemizde enerji yoksulu bir ülkede enerji yoğun sektörler konusunda tekrar düşünmemiz gerekir. Dün gerekçemiz farklıydı. İstihdamdı, gelişmeydi, şuydu buydu. Ama bundan sonraki gerekçemiz kaynakları nasıl kullanacağız, nasıl verimli olacağız, nasıl daha az atığımız olacak ve doğaya nasıl daha şey vereceğiz, daha az zarar vereceğiz. Bunlardır. Karbonsuzlaşma ile ilgili son dönemlerde yaşananların doğal bu paradigmanın krizinin bir şeyidir, bir göstergesidir. Henüz yeni paradigma gelmemiştir. Mutlaka eski paradigmayı savunanlar Trump gibi ve diğerleri gibi onlar olacaktır ve yeni paradigmayı savunanlar da olacaktır. Biz de yeni paradigmayı savunanlar olarak yapmaya çalışacağız. Bu anlamda Şura'ya bu yoldaki katkılar için ve diğer katılımcılara bu yoldaki katkılar için çok teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun.
Biz de çok teşekkür ederiz Muammer Bey. Gerçekten bizden daha cesurca ve daha iyi bir şekilde ifade ettiniz. Raporumuzun ana mesajlarından birini. Çok teşekkürler. Eleanor, sizin son mesajlarınız nelerdir?
Yes, maybe first a short response to Rosana. Thank you for your input. It's always
yes, you should certainly have a right to respond.
Thank you. Sorry, I need to wait for the translation. Just a quick response on CBAM, because I'm always quite surprised when I hear this from your side, as CBAM is based on the embedded emissions of import, not based on the processes, unlike the ETS. So I'm always surprised to hear that it would unjustifiably, look at one technology route over the other. But we can definitely take this up again bilaterally, and actually also on the need for other technologies in our own modeling. We also see for steel direct reduction iron plants operating with biomass also from 2030 to 2040. So it's still a small margin for Europe, but indeed also relevant technology. But remark aside, just a general concluding thought on CBAM, as we've seen, it presents risks and opportunities for international collaboration, and it's key to ensure we don't have a protectionist outcome, since it's not the aim of the policy, since there is still a lack of agreement on best practices at multilateral level on carbon border adjustment mechanisms. And here we have a couple of ways forward, maybe more collaboration on agreeing on green labels on a sectoral basis, starting with steel and aluminum, and also potential avenues for collaboration on principles and best practices on border carbon adjustments, for example, in WTO or other side bodies, including on the question of the export rebate mechanism, as I know it can be a controversial issue, but it will be relevant for any country implementing this instrument. And finally, more collaboration on not only labels, but further policies on industrial decarbonization, for example, as part of the G7 or COP, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both the response and for your final remarks, Elena. And so now I'd like to leave the word to Rosana.
Yeah, my final remarks here is that we are now with almost what I see a common diagnostic, a common view on how to improve, how to go beyond what we are doing today. So what I propose is that perhaps we take the opportunity that we do have this COP30 here in Brazil. We from E+, we are proposing something that we've been calling the Belém Consensus, which is a consensus among nations that we have perhaps to review some of the supply chains, some of the ways that we are sharing the wealth along the world. It's a review of the Washington Consensus for those who are, I'm not, but for those who are economists, they may relate to. But this Belém Consensus would bring a new development model to the world that comes together with capitalism, of course, but also with the environment or environmental issues embedded in it. So I invite everyone that wants to better understand our idea on the Belém Consensus and want to join forces with us on the Belém Consensus, just to look for me or for us in Brazil. Even you can look for Eleanor, that she gets to me as well. My final words is to invite everybody to help us to do this reflection, this global reflection on how to change the development model that brought us here into something that makes economic sense, but also environmental sense.
Thank you very much, Rosana, for this very meaningful call. Now, I would like to thank all of our panelists for their great contributions and leave the last word to Alkım again for the closing remarks. Yes, I would like to thank everyone as well. It's a very invigorating and very exciting approach, all of the arguments and discussions. And this is a topic that should be taken into effect very comprehensively, truly. It's not just adaptation to CBAM. We're talking about industrial transformation, about competitiveness, about development, and how the wealth arising from development can be shared equally globally on a global level. And all of our panelists touched upon very significant topics, underlining very important points. And in this work, in the study that we've carried out, and also in other studies, rather than bringing in definite solutions, we do prefer to create platforms to discuss various solutions from various perspectives. That's our purpose, actually. So in that sense, touching upon the CBAM and the transformation, we need to have the significance on increasing international collaboration on possible solutions. So therefore, this knowledge sharing platforms that the panelists talk about should be even enlarged with the participation of more countries also, as Rosana talked about. And we need to discuss this all together to successfully manage this transformation process together. And I think we're a little bit over time, so I don't want to take up more of your time. Without further ado, I would like to thank all of the panelists for all their contributions. And the report is on air as of today, as of this meeting, and you can reach both the Turkish and English versions of this report from our website. Thank you all, and I wish you all a wonderful day.